Tangent. Satanism. So last summer I was watching the 2024 Paris Olympics, and during the 4-hour opening ceremony, there was a 2-minute segment in which a giant cloche, that's that dome that covers food, it's French for bell, a giant cloche is lifted to reveal a singer dressed as Dionysus. If you didn't know, Dionysus is a Greek god, and the Olympics is actually based on a similar series of sporting events that was held in ancient Greece. So it kind of makes sense. Dionysus was positioned on a runway surrounded by drag performers, posing in a way that some people felt was a reference to Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, one of the most frequently parodied images in all of pop culture history. Now, if this doesn't make you so angry that you're literally about to rip a door off its hinges with your bare hands and teeth, or if you're completely confused as to how anyone could possibly be so angry about 2 minutes of drag queens on stage at the Olympics, well, then you are completely out of touch with the zeitgeist of the 2020s. I envy you bitterly, and I long for the sweet embrace of death. The drag queen Dionysus moment, as well as an earlier segment featuring French metal band Gojira performing a campy pastiche of the French Revolution with Marie Antoinette holding her own severed head, prompted outrage well beyond the scope of the usual social media nonsense. The opening ceremony was condemned by the Vatican, by the Bishops' Conference of France, by the Russian Orthodox Church. Turkish President Erdogan called it, quote, a disgusting attack on humanity's sacred values and an imposition of the LGBT lobby. The Slovak Deputy PM condemned the, quote, repellent symbols of deviant decadence. And US President-elect Donald Trump called the ceremony, quote, a disgrace.
I thought that the opening ceremony was a disgrace.
Don Jr., quote, hopefully one day enough people will finally have had enough of the BS. Till then, you can continue to watch everything good and decent and everything you hold dear get burned to the fucking ground. Elon Musk twat, unless there is more bravery to stand up for what is fair and right, Christianity will perish. And none of this is very surprising or noteworthy. We live in an age of reaction and resurgent homophobia. Conservatives reflexively see drag queens existing in the vague proximity of children, or even just existing in public at all, as tantamount to glorifying pedophilia. So whatever. This kind of thing has just become another Tuesday. But what caught my attention about this particular collective pissing of the pants, this ritual pooping of the liturgical vestments, was the even more hysterical reaction of influencers who saw the ceremony not only as equivalent to child molestation, not only as a merciless attack on Christianity, and in fact on all things sacred, but as public confirmation of a nefarious global conspiracy of worshippers dedicated to none other than the Prince of Darkness, Satan himself. In response to the Gojira clip, popular misogyny influencer and alleged human trafficker Andrew Tate tweet, Satanists control the West, and they show you that they worship the devil. It's not a conspiracy theory. They literally show you. Are you blind? This post got 131,000 likes. I collected dozens of posts that day upholding the Olympic ceremony as definitive evidence of a global Satanist conspiracy. Many from the usual suspects, like Alex Jones, who announced, the Pedo-Olympics has had its Bud Light moment. Satan is the god of this world. Jewish conspiracy theorist Naomi Wolf, who you'd think would know better, but you'd be wrong, tweeted simply, Satan appears to be real. Some of the memes are so offensive, I probably can't even show them. One that stood out to me in particular is a caricature of a bunch of devil-horned drag queens taking over Paris in a sea of hellfire beneath a bloody 666 and a pride flag, and two of the demons have speech bubbles, which I have censored, but which, beneath the pixelation, you just have to take my word for it, they are saying, quote, we are Jewish, just in case this was too subtle for you otherwise. So what is this? What is happening? Well, from a historically informed perspective, Nothing unusual. What we have in our hands here is a classic satanic panic. This current panic is basically an extension of QAnon, the apocalyptic conspiracy cult that peaked around 2021, but whose central ideas have essentially become mainstream as post-Q or whatever we want to call it. The core idea is that the world is ruled by an elite cabal of satanic pedophiles from whom we can only be saved by a storm of retaliatory violence. But QAnon didn't start this. QAnon itself is largely an elaborate outgrowth of the Pizzagate conspiracy theory, which claimed that John Podesta's leaked emails contained cryptic references to an elite satanic pedophile sex dungeon beneath a DC neighborhood pizzeria. But this kind of satanic panic has existed in one form or another for at least 2,000 years. For example, there was the 1980s satanic ritual abuse panic, the 1890s satanic Freemason panic, the 17th century witch trials, the medieval and early modern blood libel pogroms against Jews, and we're going to talk about all that in this video. But before we talk about Satanism, we need to talk about Satan. Part 1. Whence cometh evil? So, at the risk of starting with too broad a question, what is the nature of reality? Okay, that's too broad. Start over. Tangent. Satanism. Satanism implies Satan. So where does Satan come from? Well, from Christianity. So where did Christians get the idea of Satan? Not all religions have a Satan. The ancient Greeks didn't have a Satan. Sometimes people in Christian cultures assume that Hades was like the ancient Greek Satan, but that is not correct. Hades is not the prince of evil. He's not even really more evil than the other gods. Hades is the god of the underworld, the god of the dead. Sure, he does bad things like abducting Persephone, but so do all the other gods. Zeus is certainly not a god of goodness. He's always, turning into a swan and raping some folks. Greek gods exist beyond good and evil, or more accurately, before good and evil, because there just is no concept in Greek paganism of a cosmic battle between good and evil. The Greeks didn't think that way, and neither, by the way, did the Egyptians. As we'll see later in this video, some people, including some self-avowed Satanists, identify the ancient Egyptian god Set with Satan. But that's not what Set was to the Egyptians. Set was a god of storms, of chaos, and of foreigners. And granted, he does some messed up stuff. He does murder and dismember his brother Osiris. Usually this sort of thing is not considered good behavior, but people still worshipped Set. Ancient Egyptian religion just didn't have a strict dualism of good versus evil. Their cosmology was more about the tension between order and chaos, forces which they thought should be balanced. Okay, so what about the Hebrew Bible? Well, that is where the word Satan comes from. The Hebrew word Satan means adversary or accuser and appears in the Hebrew Bible 27 times, but not in the book of Genesis. The serpent in Genesis is never identified as Satan. Christians retroactively decided that the serpent is Satan. But try reading Genesis without assuming that the serpent is Satan. It actually makes more sense. Because the serpent is punished by being made to slither on the ground. If the serpent is a fallen archangel, the prince of darkness, why would that be the punishment? It doesn't make any sense. The most famous appearance of Satan in the Hebrew Bible is in the book of Job, and I feel like that Satan is really just an accusing angel, not the arch-fiend. Like in Job, the discourse between Yahweh and the accuser, it doesn't really have the tone of a struggle between everything good and everything evil. It's more like two drunks placing a bet. Yahweh's like, so, have you noticed how faithful my servant Job is? And then Satan's like, yeah, well, you did give him a lot of stuff, so it's not really that impressive. And then Yahweh's like, well, let's see what happens if we ruin his fucking life. Game on, asshole. But it's fine. At the end, they give him a new wife and new kids. It's fine. It's fine. So I just checked the book of Job, and I was wrong about Job's wife. She doesn't die, but she's also not mentioned at the end. It's like a complete loose thread. So where in the ancient world is the devil? Where is he? He's not in Greece. he's not in Egypt, he's not in Israel. Well, the closest we're going to find to the Prince of Darkness is probably in Persia, where there was and still is an ancient religion called Zoroastrianism. According to Zoroastrianism, the nature of reality, see, the opening question was not too broad, we're really doing this. Zoroastrianism sees the cosmos as a dualistic struggle between good and evil. So it's all Zoroastrianism's fault. Thanks a lot, Freddie Mercury. The god of goodness is called Ahura Mazda, who's a creator sky deity, the Lord of Wisdom, and he's opposed by Angra Mainyu, the spirit of destruction. And according to Zoroastrian belief, the struggle between good and evil will end in a total victory of Ahura Mazda. So Angra Mainyu is probably the pre-Christian deity that most closely resembles the modern idea of Satan. Now, some people speculate that Zoroastrianism actually influenced Christianity. The three magi who visit the baby Jesus, they were probably Zoroastrian priests. So there was a bit of Zoroastrianism going around. In any case, the Christian New Testament does mention Satan a lot more. You know, he's tempting Jesus, he's fathering lies, and then in the book of Revelation, things finally get interesting and we get the beast and 666 and Satan becoming the great red dragon and going to war with heaven. But most of the lore about Satan is not biblical at all. Some of it comes from Dante, a lot of it comes from Milton. The Latin word Lucifer, equivalent of the Greek phosphoros, originally referred to the morning star, that is, the planet Venus. And then that word, Lucifer, just got used as the translation of a Hebrew phrase in Isaiah referring to the king of Babylon. So it's just by tradition that the proper noun Lucifer became allegorically associated with the Christian Satan. The name Beelzebub actually is scriptural. It means Lord of the Flies, and it's basically Hebrew slander against the Canaanite god Baal, who probably wasn't that different from Yahweh, honestly. In fact, sometimes the word Baal, which just means Lord, literally did refer to Yahweh. The word Moloch or Molech is also from the Hebrew Bible, associated with child sacrifice, though it's unclear whether Moloch was the name of a god or if it simply refers to the type of sacrifice, which raises the scandalous possibility that at some point, child sacrifices were made to Yahweh. I mean, is it so hard to believe? Abraham and Isaac, that was a close call. You might assume that Baphomet is also Hebrew, but no. Baphomet is a medieval French corruption of the name of the Muslim prophet Muhammad, who you may have heard of. You might be noticing a trend where words for devils are derived from misunderstandings of other people's religion. That is usually how this works. Baphomet got famous in Europe in 1307 when King Philip IV of France basically owed a lot of money to the Knights Templar, so he convinced the Pope that, okay, one, that they were gay homosexuals, and two, that they worshipped Baphomet. It was a crusade against the Crusaders, Christian on Christian crime. So the Inquisition tortured confessions out of the Templars and they were burned at the stake, as was the custom at the time. Okay, I'm oversimplifying this obviously, but you know, history is more entertaining if you oversimplify it. Probably the most recognizable image of Satanism today is the depiction of Baphomet as a goat-headed demon. This was invented by 19th century occultists. It's a recent addition to the lore. Look, the thing about religion is it's a fandom. It's pop culture. They make it up as they go along. Look, I know you didn't vote for a Satanism tangent because you wanted yet another video of atheist ranting. You want to hear about fucked up perverts doing messed up stuff to kids. You want blasphemies. You want blood rituals. You want demonic orgies. You want consecrated hosts inserted into the bodily orifices of naked young women. Yes, that's why we're all here. It's why everyone is obsessed with Satanism and always has been. So let's get into it. Part 2, Satanic Panics. So let's just face the facts. There really was no such thing as organized religious Satanism until around the time the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper. And I will talk about actual Satanism in a section at the end, but most of this video is about fake Satanism, because nearly every accusation of Satanism throughout history, and there's been a lot of them, has been false. The history of Satanism is essentially a 2,000-year history of slander and libel. In the book Children of Lucifer, The Origins of Modern Religious Satanism by Ruben van Luijk, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce Dutch.
Nederlands.
Makes this argument very, very thoroughly. In the spirit of Satanism, why don't we go through this in reverse chronological order? You know, because Satanists do everything backwards. Let's start with the 1980s Satanic Panic, a moral panic in which over 12,000 accusations of so-called satanic ritual abuse were made largely on the basis of bogus recovered memory therapy. The most famous case is the McMartin preschool trials. At the time, and maybe still, the longest and most expensive series of trials in American history. Fortunately, everyone at McMartin was acquitted after 7 years of investigations and trials, but other cases led to convictions, like poor Kelly Michaels, who was convicted on 115 counts of sexual abuse and sentenced to 47 years in prison after 51 nursery school students accused her of sodomizing them with forks, knives, and swords, and forcing them to eat her piss and shit.
They say you inserted objects including Lego blocks, forks, spoons, serrated knives into their anuses, vaginas,
and a
penises,
sword.
And a sword.
Yeah.
It's very hard to believe, yet the jury believed it, and not you.
No one is willing to doubt a child.
She was released after 5 years when the appeals court found, quote, the interviews of the children were highly improper and utilized coercive and unduly suggestive methods. So what is this? How does something like this even happen? Well, a lot of people deserve the blame for the Satanic Panic. Therapists whose botched methods of suggestive leading questions and hypnotherapy falsely convinced thousands of people, many of them children, that they were victims of horrific abuse at the hands of often their own parents. Religious leaders also share a lot of blame for exploiting this interest in Satan to inflame a culture war, attacking everything from rock music to Dungeons and Dragons.
Halloween is the time when all across the country, in secret little places, in the dark, there will be little babies sacrificed to Satan.
Law enforcement is also, of course, to blame. Cops collaborated with pastors to basically create an inquisition. There was even a video manual distributed to police departments called The Law Enforcement Guide to Satanic Cults.
In satanic occultism, that which is good is bad, that is also protected by the United States Constitution and the freedom of religion.
Yeah, that pesky Constitution, always getting in the way of law enforcement.
There's two different communities that use this park. One is the pagan or occultic community, and the other community is, of course, the homosexual community.
All law enforcement officers should be familiar with the different types of degeneracy.
Fuck you.
Sexual trafficking of children, corpse theft, black market baby selling, pedophilia, pornography.
I'm sorry, I know it's not funny, but come on. Pedophilia. Pornography.
Pornography.
Most witches are very adept at using the tarot.
Not the tarot.
You'll note on our model, another area we'll want to note is the foot area.
Like, it's funny, but it would be more funny if people didn't go to jail for this. So The Patient Zero of the 80s Satanic Panic was an extremely irresponsible book called Michelle Remembers, which I'm gonna have to try really hard not to talk about for 3 hours. Michelle Remembers tells the allegedly true story of Canadian woman Michelle Smith, who spends a year recounting childhood satanic cult abuse to her psychiatrist-turned-husband, Lawrence Pazder, MD. That's what they teach you in psychiatry school, right? Always marry your patients. This book sold millions of copies and was promoted by Oprah. How do I even summarize this? So after experiencing a traumatic miscarriage, Michelle gets in touch with her old psychiatrist, who she's obviously in love with, and tells him that there's something she needs to tell him, but she doesn't know what. And she soon begins to enter hypnotic trance states in which she assumes the voice of a 5-year-old girl. You know, "Mommy, mommy, I want my dolly," like 5-year-olds say. Michelle's regression to the persona of an innocent 5-year-old girl reminds me of what the pervert community calls little space. And in the voice of this 5-year-old, Michelle describes, well, initially kind of vague scenes of sexual abuse at the hands of witches. But Dr. Pazder, a devout Catholic and psychotherapeutic genius, is, quote, touched by the, quote, innocence of this, quote, 5-year-old child who happens to be in the body of an attractive 27-year-old woman whom he would later marry. So Dr. Pazder holds her hand, Michelle's hand, his patient Michelle, and he lets her rest her head on his shoulder, as psychiatrists often do. And Dr. Pazder assures Michelle that these bizarre experiences she's having in a hypnotic trance state are definitely literal childhood memories that she is reliving in real time 22 years later. Over the next 14 months, he tape records more than 600 hours of recovered memory hypnotherapy, the transcripts of which form the bulk of Michelle remembers. So I'm just going to list some of the things the Satanists do in Michelle's memories, and then we can decide together how much of this we think is true. Michelle remembers forced satanic orgies, forced cannibalism, forced enemas, forcing Michelle to defecate on the Bible and the crucifix, sacrificing kittens to Satan, pushing Michelle into an open grave and dumping dead kittens into the open grave, cutting up dead babies, crucifying and burning a dead baby, rubbing dead baby blood and gore all over Michelle's body. I'm sorry, I know this is disturbing, but Oprah told me it's really important that I read this. Other things that happen in this book include the Satanists lock Michelle in a cage full of snakes, where Michelle constructs an apotropaic cross out of her own hair and shit. A beautiful possessed lady from Vancouver with a long snake-like tongue and a swiveling head eats Michelle's feces and then kisses Michelle with her snake tongue, causing an actual snake to slither out of Michelle's vagina. Satanists lock Michelle inside an effigy of Satan full of snakes and tell her to eat a dead baby. Michelle then shoves the snakes and decaying baby pieces out of the eyes of the Satan effigy as a warning to the other children. A pointy-nosed man called the Doctor surgically attaches horns and a tail to Michelle's body, which she then rips off in the frenzy of a bloody birthing ritual. The Virgin Mary appears to Michelle in a francophone persona called Ma Mère, whose French words of encouragement Michelle is miraculously able to understand. A Canadian woman speaking French? Somebody call the Vatican. They literally called the Vatican. Ma Mère miraculously heals Michelle's horn and tail wounds, explaining why she has no scars. Convenient. Satanists from around the world gather to attend a black mass offered by the beast himself. A snake wraps around Michelle's neck, and then the snake transforms into the pointed tail of Satan, Prince of Darkness. Satan speaks to Michelle, but only in metrically inept rhyming couplets. Give me back the bone that's mine, then everything will be fine. Satan orders naked children to chew up Bible pages and spit them into the fire. Dead babies play the role of bread and wine in the Black Mass. Satan cuts up dead babies and throws the pieces to his worshippers, who smear the dead baby gore all over their white robes. Satan cuts out the heart of a pubescent girl and throws it into the fire, then cuts her body into pieces. The Black Mass escalates into a cosmic battle for Michelle's soul, with circles of angels and demons swirling overhead. The Archangel Michael arrives to save Michelle. Satan is defeated, for now, with the help of Michael, Mary, and Jesus Christ himself. Yes, Jesus Christ gets dragged into this narrative. So, okay. What percentage of these things do you guys think actually happened? Leave a comment. The Satanic Panic kind of puts us all in a difficult situation, right? Because on the one hand, if you say that someone claiming to be a victim of childhood abuse is lying, and if you're wrong, then you're a horrible person and you've done a horrible thing. But on the other hand, you don't want to join a witch hunt on the basis of testimony that is quite literally unbelievable. It is impossible to believe that these things happened.
It's very hard to believe, yet the jury believed it.
I do think in this case, there is a middle ground between Michelle telling the truth and Michelle lying. And there's a couple psychologically important details that we should pay attention to. One is that Michelle, in fact, did have a difficult childhood. Her father was an abusive alcoholic who physically abused her mother, and we can speculate that maybe Michelle was abused by her father. Though there's no evidence of that, it's at least more plausible than the idea of a snake-tongued possessed woman French kissing Michelle and eating her excrement. The other important detail is that when Michelle came to Dr. Pazder, she had recently experienced a traumatic miscarriage and invasive medical procedures related to that. And I'm really repeating an observation here that comes from Sarah Marshall, who's kind of a Michelle Remembers expert. She did a great 5-part podcast about this with Michael Hobbs on You're Wrong About, and she's interviewed in a documentary about this called Satan Wants You, which I recommend if you're interested in this particular case. But in light of the fact that Michelle had recently had a traumatic miscarriage, don't you think it's salient that so many of these memories involve dead babies and dead kittens? Is it possible that Michelle's fantastical memories are kind of the manifestation of unprocessed guilt and grief that she's experiencing related to the miscarriage? I mean, I don't have a license to practice psychotherapy like Dr. Pazder, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I feel like maybe that's something I would explore before jumping to the conclusion that Michelle is definitely remembering literal memories of satanic cult abuse. In addition to being an idiot, Dr. Pazder is also a bad person, and I hate him. He has no boundaries with his patients. He gets romantically involved, and he imposes his own grandiose religious fantasies on the experience of the patient. And the result is this book where, if I were to compare it to one thing, it's the obscene novels of the Marquis de Sade, which are full of tortured blasphemy and depraved sex acts. In general, I would say there's an interesting resemblance between satanic panic media and another genre, pornography.
Pornography. You'll note on our model, another area we'll want to note is the foot area.
Satanic panics are the pornography of the moralist. That's an idea I'm paraphrasing from historian Richard Hofstadter, author of the always relevant essay, The Paranoid Style in American Politics, in which Hofstadter says, quote, "Anti-Catholicism has always been the pornography of the Puritan." What does that mean? What is he referring to? Okay, so in 1836, another Canadian woman called Maria Monk published a book called Awful Disclosures of Maria Monk, or The Hidden Secrets of a Nun's Life in a Convent Exposed. Awful Disclosures alleged that so-called black nuns at a convent called the Hôtel Dieu in Montreal instructed Maria and other nuns to have debauched sex with the local priests, and that the resulting babies were baptized and then strangled to death and buried in a lime pit in secret tunnels beneath the convent. According to Hofstadter, Awful Disclosures was, quote, probably the most widely read contemporary book in the United States before Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's strikingly similar to Michelle Remembers, and also a complete hoax. Hofstadter says, quote, anti-Catholics developed an immense lore about libertine priests, the confessional as an opportunity for seduction, licentious convents and monasteries, and the like. So anti-Catholicism has always been the pornography of the Puritan means that moralists often attribute their own morbid sexual obsessions to the targets of their moralism. In our own time, look at Pizzagate, look at QAnon, or even the cultural obsession with Jeffrey Epstein. The main activity of this Save the Children moralism is endless, obsessive fantasizing about the depraved pedophile orgies of the elite. At a certain point, it becomes pornographic, but the pornographic aspect is disavowed by people who convince themselves that they're only taking an interest in this out of a moral obligation to save the children. Although the only saving activity they ever seem to engage in is spending all their time reading about the lurid details of fantastical sex crimes.
My God! That's disgusting. Naked pics online? Where? Where did he post those?
This is also why Satan and Satanism are often portrayed as sexy, as seductive, because Christians attribute their own forbidden and repressed desires to Satan. Satanists and witches are often represented as engaging in all kinds of forbidden perversions because they symbolically represent temptation. Anyway, instead of instigating a satanic panic, Awful Disclosures instigated an anti-Catholic panic during a very anti-Catholic period of American history where millions of Catholic immigrants were arriving from Ireland and Germany. And the so-called Native Americans, that is, white Protestants, spread all these conspiracy theories about a papist plot to destroy America through mass migration secretly subsidized by the Catholic powers of Europe. Isn't it boring how idiocy never changes? American Puritans have been hunting witches since 1692, and they've never really stopped. Now, when I first started researching this, I had a hypothesis that satanic panics are a specifically Protestant phenomenon, since American Puritans and their descendants have always seen Satanists and pagans hiding around every corner. But then I started reading about French satanic panics, and it turns out that the Catholics in France are just as stupid as American Protestants. If you're Christian, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about you. Hashtag not all Christians. In the 1880s and 1890s in the French Third Republic, several books accusing Freemasons of being secret Satanists were published by former Freemason authors such as Dr. Bataille and Diana Vaughan. I put their names in quotation marks because these people are not real, but no one knew that yet. The books claimed that there was a secret Luciferian cult within Freemasonry called the Palladium. Palladists, supposedly led from America by former Confederate officer Albert Pike, allegedly included women as well as men, and allegedly worshipped Baphomet, held black masses and satanic orgies, spit on the crucifix, inserted consecrated hosts into women's vaginas, were the secret conspirators behind the French Revolution, and who were now planning to destroy the papacy. All of this created a huge scandal among French Catholics and was essentially endorsed by Pope Leo XIII until it was all publicly revealed to be a hoax by the writer Leo Taxil, who was Dr. Bataille and Diana Vaughan et al. I say until, but in fact, claims originating in the Taxil hoax never really died and are still commonplace among conspiracy theorists online who to this day talk about Luciferian Freemasons plotting to destroy Christianity and sacrificing children, etc., etc. Taxil's purpose in creating the hoax was to make the church look bad. But you should never create a hoax like this, because not only does a lie travel around the world before the truth can put on its boots, but also lies never die, no matter how ridiculous they are. Anyway, I find it interesting how similar the American Protestant accusations against Catholics were to the French Catholic accusations against Freemasons. It's all the same accusations. And it's also similar to the Satanic Panic of the 1980s and to the QAnon madness of the decade in which I'm making this video. Okay, we're still in the 19th century and I need to make it to the year 0, so let's pick up the pace. We'll skip the 18th century because it was an age of reason. Sort of. Let me talk about one satanic panic in the 17th century because I love it and I want to talk about it. The satanic panic in question is known as the Affair of the Poisons, and it began in 1677 when the chief of the Paris police was tipped off about a secret network of poisoners and occultists. Among the people arrested were Catherine Trianon, a lesbian sorceress who kept a human skeleton in her reception room, and a woman known as La Voisin, a fortune teller, abortionist, and seller of poisons, who may have indirectly murdered more than 2,000 people. God forbid a woman do anything. Fears of a conspiracy to poison the king himself led Louis XIV to establish a special court for trying cases of poisoning and witchcraft. During the trials, and sometimes under torture, elaborate testimony was given about black masses performed using naked women as altars, worshipping the devil, sacrificial abortions, consecrating menstrual fluids in the blood of murdered children, throwing dead babies into fires, and yes, say it with me, inserting consecrated hosts into the vaginas of naked women. You know, the usual. Anyway, the affair wrapped up pretty quickly when the king's own mistress became implicated in the conspiracy. Awkward. But 36 people were executed, most of them poisoners, magicians, alchemists, that sort of thing. Before the Affair of the Poisons, a lot of these main tropes of satanic panics had circulated throughout the medieval and early modern eras during the witch trials, where magic of any kind was equated with worshipping the devil. And in the witch trials, you really see in action the principle that satanic panics are the pornography of the moralist, because the line between accusations of witchcraft and sexual fantasy gets very blurry. Witch trials often involved the invasive inspection of women's bodies for witches' marks. In the horrible Malleus Maleficarum, the witch hunting manual published by the Vatican-endorsed Heinrich Kramer in 1486, there's a kind of obsession on display with women fucking demons.
Incubus, a male demonic force that copulates with human females.
It's hard to overstate how misogynistic this book is. Heinrich Kramer is like a medieval evil Andrew Tate with the jurisdiction to torture and murder people. Quote, "A greater number of witches is found in the fragile feminine sex than among men. She is more carnal than a man, as is clear from her many carnal abominations. Femina comes from Fe and Minus, since she is ever weaker to hold and preserve the faith." God, and it's written in that scholastic argument and rebuttal format. This motherfucker thinks he's Thomas Aquinas. He also accuses witches of killing babies, eating babies, drinking baby blood, and yes, stealing men's penises. Castration. Before the witch trials, many of these same accusations were applied to Jews, the terrible blood libel trope that led to pogroms and expulsions. Medieval Christians accused Jews of worshipping Satan, desecrating the host, crucifying children, drinking the blood of Christian babies. Sometimes blood libel was the result of needing someone to blame for, say, a plague or the disappearance or unsolved murder of a child, like William of Norwich in 1144 or Simon of Trent in 1475. The root of Satanism accusations in general tends to be a need to scapegoat outsiders, witches, foreigners, religious outgroups. That tendency has of course existed beyond and before Christianity, and Christians have even been the victims of it themselves. The church father Tertullian said of the treatment of early Christians by the Romans, quote, "We are accused of infamous secret atrocities, an infanticide, a feast of blood, and incest. They think the Christians are the cause of every public disaster, of every affliction with which the people are visited. If the Tiber River rises as high as the city walls, if the Nile does not send its waters up over the fields, if the heavens give no rain, if there is an earthquake, if there is a famine or pestilence, straightway the cry is, 'Away with the Christians to the lions.'" There's almost a kind of monomyth or archetypal accusation directed at religious outgroups with tropes that have been stable for thousands of years. Killing babies, drinking blood, committing deviant sex acts. But the archetype takes the particular form of Satanism when Christians are the accusers. I guess Christians tend not to be very imaginative when it comes to other people's religious practices, so the accusation of Satanism tends to assume that alleged Satanists are essentially practicing upside-down Christianity, saying the Lord's Prayer backwards, turning crosses upside down, offering inverted Catholic masses where a dead baby is the Eucharist and a naked woman is the altar. But the evidence that anyone has ever actually practiced these things is very scant, to put it charitably. So for most of history, there's been no such thing as Satanism, except as an accusation thrown around by Christians. But in the second half of the 20th century, all of that was about to change. Part 3. Actual Satanism. So when rumors about Satanism are constantly circulating, and there's all these stories about black masses and ritual orgies and pacts with the devil, it's only a matter of time until the accusation causes the crime. In other words, people hear what Satanists are allegedly doing, and they think, you know what? That actually sounds pretty cool. Don't mind if I do. Honestly, I'm surprised it took as long as it did. The first ever organized Church of Satan was founded in 1966 by Anton, Szandor, LaVey. But before we get into that, let's list some honorable mentions. In the 19th century, there was a lot of what Van Leck calls romantic Satanism, this sort of literary pseudo-Satanism that mostly just admires Satan as a symbol of rebellion, of enlightenment, and of freedom. The unintentional father of romantic Satanism is the poet John Milton, whose poem Paradise Lost is maybe the best poem in the English language, and there's not exactly a shortage of good poetry in English. Quote, "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, but all but less than he whom thunder hath made greater. Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." Satan is a very attractive character in Paradise Lost because he seems human. There's something relatable about him. He's fallible. He's engaged in this ultimately futile war against an omnipotent enemy. And there's something kind of beautifully tragic about that rebellion. Whereas God, it's impossible to make God relatable because God is an omnipotent, cosmic, feudal lord. This is why Christianity is smart, to give God a human avatar. It gives us something to relate to. But Jesus is not much of a character in Paradise Lost, so all of our sympathy sort of gravitates towards Satan and then later towards Eve. If you only read parts of Paradise Lost, read books 1, 2, and 9. Those are the best. So the romantic interpretation of Satan was a massive influence on generations of radicals and artists: Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, William Blake, Charles Baudelaire. And you do kind of have to wonder what Milton was thinking. We know that John Milton was an anti-monarchist, and he writes this poem where Satan is this kind of like celestial anti-monarchist. I don't know. It's interesting. So Romantic Satanists didn't actually worship Satan in any religious sense, but there was no organized religious Satanism until Anton Szandor LaVey founded the Church of Satan in 1966 in San Francisco, headquartered in a black painted house.
In nomine Satanis Luciferi excelsis. Hail Satan!
Hail Satan!
Shemham Farash!
Shemham Farash!
Now, it would be easy to caricature Anton LaVey as like a lecherous carnival magician because he was a lecherous carnival magician. Who, in my opinion, started taking himself a little too seriously.
Place us in a position of sovereignty that we might look down upon our inferiors and cast their kin into the morass of mediocrity where they belong.
I don't trust anyone who founds a religion. It's not really a good sign, is it? Personality-wise. LaVey started out as a keyboard player, something I have in common with him. He was a carnival calliope and organ player performing under the name The Great Szandor. The Great Szandor claims that while he was an organist at a strip club, he had an affair with Marilyn Monroe, which is the biggest lie I've ever heard in my entire life. The Satanic Bible, published by Anton LaVey in 1969, is the closest thing to a foundational text. The core of the Satanic philosophy, I suppose, is expressed in the 9 Satanic statements. 1. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. 2. Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. 3. Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. 4. Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates. 5. Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. 6. Satan represents responsibility to the responsible instead of concern for psychic vampires. There's a whole chapter in this book on dealing with psychic vampires. It's the most new age crystal lady shit I've ever read in my entire life. 7. Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, more often worse than those that walk on all fours, who, because of his divine, spiritual, and intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all. 8. Satan represents all of the so-called sins, as they all lead to physical, mental, or emotional gratification. And 9. Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all those years. Okay, oh my god, look at the picture of Anton in the back. He looks like a sophisticated goth. Who knows what he's doing?
It is important to me to carry myself in a manner where people are going to say, you know what, he knows what he's doing.
The Satanic Bible is divided into 4 books: the Book of Satan, the Book of Lucifer, the Book of Belial, and the Book of Leviathan, corresponding to the elements fire, air, earth, and water. The Book of Satan, or the Infernal Diatribe, is a philosophical ramble plagiarized from an 1896 book called Might is Right, by Ragnar Redbeard, which is a racist, misogynist, social Darwinist misinterpretation of Nietzsche's philosophy. LaVey did tone down the racism and misogyny somewhat, although the Satanic Bible still contains such absurdities as LaVey's dress code for satanic rituals. Quote, "Black robes are worn by the male participants. The purpose in covering the face is to allow the participant freedom to express emotion in the face without concern. Female participants wear garments which are sexually suggestive, or all black clothing for older women." I mean, at least it's honest. So the Satanic Bible advocates a kind of egotistic religion of the self. LaVey says that the highest satanic holiday is your birthday, which honestly is so ridiculous that it's adorable. A lot of people say that Anton LaVey is like Ayn Rand plus occult rituals, and that's true. Quote, "Death to the weakling, wealth to the strong. Hate your enemies with a whole heart, and if a man smite you on one cheek, smash him on the other." Okay, buddy. I don't believe Anton LaVey has ever smashed anyone. Walking around dressed like that, I'm guessing he was the one who was getting smashed. LaVey does clarify that he believes in the rights of others. Quote, "Therefore, Satanism does not advocate rape, child molesting, sexual defilement of animals." And it's good of him to clear that up, considering the stereotype, but it also seems kind of inconsistent with the might makes right attitude. Like, why do people have rights if might makes right? It is a very lascivious religion. LaVey advocates the use of masturbation in rituals to generate sexual energy. And on the topic of death, he says that fear of death and clinging to life is healthy because the vital ego outlives the flesh. I just simply have no idea what that's could possibly mean, and it doesn't make any sense. And importantly, the thing that makes Anton LaVey more than just an edgy atheist is that he advocates ritual. He claims that ritual functions as a, quote, "dogmatic, anti-intellectual device. It shuts down the intellect and purifies the will. Quote, man needs ceremony and ritual, fantasy and enchantment." I think there's probably some truth to that. I actually wanted to do a satanic ritual for this video, but I ran out of time. Maybe it's for the best considering the direction this country is going. Like, I could actually end up being burnt at the stake. But I even bought a ritual dagger and a chalice for this. And I also bought a goat skull, which, like, what was I even gonna do with this? I mean, whatever, it's still tax deductible. My life is weird. Oh, let's just do a quick satanic ritual. In the name of Satan, ruler of the earth, king of the world, I command the forces of darkness to bestow their infernal power upon me. Oh, hear the names: Astaroth, Hecate, Baphomet, Beelzebub. I hence invoke thy aid. Fuck Donald Trump. Fuck Elon Musk. May their breakup be humiliatingly public and spectacularly entertaining. In nomine Dei Nostri Satanis Luciferi Excelsi. Shemhem Fresh, hail Satan. Okay, how did that feel? I guess it felt good. I don't know what I'm doing with this goat skull. I'm gonna put it away. This is weird. So when LaVey wrote the Satanic Bible, he legitimately thought that Christianity was in decline and that he was creating the religion of a new age, which turned out to be completely wrong. By the 1980s, fundamentalist Christianity in America was fully resurgent, and Anton LaVey's biggest fans ended up being metalheads, a fandom he didn't particularly appreciate. Anton LaVey may have been a Satanist, but he was still a grumpy old man born in 1930, and he never liked metal. In fact, he's cited as an example of true satanic music, the 1920s pop song, Yes, We Have No... Okay, I can't even say the title, it's so fucking funny. He's cited as an example of true satanic music, the 1920s pop song, Yes, We Have No Bananas.
Yes, we have no bananas. We have no bananas today.
Unfortunately, in his later years, Anton LaVey became friendly with, well, fascists who shared his anti-egalitarian views. And he even suggested using eugenics to breed an elite Satanist class. If he were alive today, I'm pretty confident he would have voted for Trump. So I think we can pretty confidently put Anton LaVey in the garbage. No thank you. But whatever, he died in 1997 and the Church of Satan is now mostly irrelevant. However, there are a handful of other Satanist organizations that deserve a mention before I wrap this up. In the 70s, there was in fact a schism within the Church of Satan, which is, I guess, how you know it's a real religion. Disciple Michael Aquino objected to LaVey's granting high priesthood to his personal driver, as well as to anyone who paid him enough money. Also, he was apparently a sincere theistic Satanist who believed that Satan is an actual transcendent being from whom he received a revelation asking to be known by the name of the Egyptian god Set. And so he founded the Temple of Set for the purpose of actual devil worship. While Anton LaVey clarified that he never actually believed in Satan, and this was all kind of a Randian objectivism dressed up with a little light occultism. The most prominent Satanist organization today is the Satanic Temple, which is famous for putting up those statues of Baphomet in courthouses to counter statues of the Ten Commandments. As far as I can tell, the Satanic Temple is basically a secular humanist organization that advocates separation of church and state. According to their website, quote, "The mission of the Satanic Temple is to encourage benevolence and empathy, reject tyrannical authority, advocate practical common sense, oppose injustice, and undertake noble pursuits." Okay. Sounds fine to me. Quote, "The Church of Satan expresses vehement opposition to the campaigns and activities of the Satanic Temple, asserting themselves as the only true arbiters of Satanism, while the Satanic Temple dismisses the Church of Satan as irrelevant and inactive." Oh my god, Satanist drama? I should have just done a tangent on that. There's a documentary about the Satanic Temple called Hail Satan, which follows their activities, and from that documentary I got the sense that the Satanic Temple is basically edgy Reddit atheists who cause Christians to have panic attacks because they call themselves Satanists. And I want to say to the Christians, guys, get it together. You're being trolled online by geeks. Anyway, I guess I should address one last question. Am I a Satanist? No, I think LaVey and Satanism sucks. The Temple of Satan seems fine. I support their journey. But personally, I've never felt I needed a satanic organization to be an edgy atheist, if you hadn't noticed. Now where's that goat skull?
There's a fruit store on our street. It's run by a Greek, and he keeps good things to eat, but you should hear him speak. When you ask him anything, why he never answers no. He just yeses you to death, and as he takes your dough, he tells you yes.